I'm Paul Cassell, and I'm a professor of law at the Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. There are actually two problems rather than one that I think really need to be focused on. Uh, there's a substantive problem and a procedural problem. I think the biggest substantive problem that we're facing as a nation right now is to figure out why homicide rates are so high. And particularly, if you look at the last few years, to figure out why homicide rates spiked in 2020. I've come up with a theory. I call it the Minneapolis effect. I think when there was controversy about police presence, a lot of police officers pulled back, and that produced a result there, which was a significant homicide spike in 2020 that we're still dealing with. Obviously, there are a lot of competing explanations. Certainly, I'm sure it was a multi-factor situation, but I think that's a critical issue for us to get to the bottom of, and I know the council is working on that. On the procedural side of things, I think one of the main issues facing the criminal justice system today is how to move away from the old two-party model, prosecutors versus defense attorneys, and start to recognize that third parties have interests in the system. In particular, crime victims now have rights all over the nation at important points in the criminal justice process. And I think the system is still coming to grips with that fact, trying to figure out how to integrate crime victims into our criminal justice process. Proud to have been working on a pro bono case recently. I represent families of two Boeing 737 MAX crashes, and Boeing was criminally charged in that case, but the deal they reached, the deferred prosecution agreement, was done secretly without involving the victims. So I went into court, argued on behalf of the victims, and the federal district court judge agreed with me that their rights had been violated. And currently, litigation is ongoing about how the victims should be able to object to the plea deal that has been reached by Boeing and the government. And what I'm very proud of there is I think not only am I making sure the victim's voice is heard in that particular case, but I think it also sends a message to prosecutors, defense attorneys, to judges that business as usual can no longer be done. Crime victims now have a seat at the table and are now entitled to be heard in criminal justice processes. One of the things that people don't know about me is that I reached the finals of my dorm ping pong tournament in college and unfortunately lost to John McEnroe. Back then we played games to 21 and we got to 19 all, and doggone it if he wasn't mentally tough and got the last 2 points. One of the things that I'm most proud about in my career is that I was a federal district court judge for about 5 years, and then I left that position to go back to teaching law at the University of Utah and to advocate for crime victims' rights. But while I was a judge, I did a case that attracted a lot of attention. I was required under mandatory minimum sentencing laws to sentence Weldon Angelos to 55 years in federal prison for bringing a gun to a couple of marijuana deals. And I wrote a lengthy opinion saying this was unfair, unjust. Congress had tied my hands and forced me to impose that sentence, but I did so, I like to say, kicking and screaming. And I think I made such a fuss about the way mandatory minimums produce long sentences in cases where they weren't needed, and frankly ignored crime victims and others who had cases where longer sentences might have been appropriate. Things were just out of whack. And since my opinion was published, it attracted a lot of attention, and Congress changed those particular laws.